like, subscribe, and share with our loving friends.
Some emergency calls are recorded, some are archived, some are forgotten. But once in a generation, a call comes through that was never supposed to exist. If you ever hear your own name whispered during a 911 call, pray the voice belongs to someone who's still alive. At exactly 2:17 a.m. on October 18, 2024, veteran 911 dispatcher Ethan Brooks adjusted his headset inside the Black Hollow Emergency Communications Center in West Virginia and prepared for another ordinary night. For nearly 12 years, the overnight shift had become second nature. The calls rarely surprised him anymore. Domestic disputes, minor traffic accidents, the occasional lost hiker wandering too far into the Appalachian wilderness. Nothing he hadn't handled before. Outside the reinforced windows, dense fog slowly drifted across the mountain roads surrounding Black Hollow. The forests beyond town stretched for miles without interruption, swallowing abandoned farms, forgotten churches, and logging trails that no one had used in decades. Most people considered the mountains beautiful. The people who actually lived there knew better. Around Black Hollow, there were roads locals refused to drive after midnight. Entire valleys where radios stopped working, places where search dogs suddenly refused to move. Old-timers claimed the mountains remembered everyone who entered them. No one under 40 believed those stories, at least, not until something happened that couldn't be explained. The digital clock quietly changed. 2:16. 2:17. A sharp notification echoed through Ethan's headset. Incoming emergency call. His computer automatically searched for the caller's location. Nothing appeared, no phone number, no GPS coordinates, no carrier information, only a blank screen. Ethan frowned. That had never happened before. He pressed the answer button. 911. What's your emergency? Silence. Only soft static. Then, very faintly, the sound of wind. Not outdoor wind. Wind slipping through cracks inside an old wooden house. A child's voice finally emerged, barely above a whisper. He's watching me. Every instinct Ethan had developed over 12 years told him this wasn't a prank. Sweetheart, he said calmly, can you tell me your name? Several seconds passed. The little girl spoke again. Please don't make me go downstairs. She sounded no older than 8 years old, terrified, trying not to cry, trying not to make any noise at all. Ethan quickly opened the emergency mapping system. The screen flashed one sentence: location unknown. He refreshed it. Again, location unknown. His heartbeat slowed. Every emergency call generated coordinates. Every single one. His supervisor noticed the unusual alert and walked over. What do you have? No location. She looked at the screen herself. Run a manual trace. Another dispatcher immediately attempted to locate the signal. Nothing. No nearby cell tower. No satellite position. No registered device. It was as if the call existed. Without a phone, without a signal, without a source. The child suddenly inhaled sharply. He's outside my room. Then Ethan heard something else. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Slow fingernails dragging across old wood. Not loud, almost gentle but close. Very close. The little girl's breathing became quicker. He knows I'm talking to you. The scratching stopped. Silence filled the line. Then another voice appeared. A man, calm, deep, almost comforting. Hang up. The call ended instantly. Every dispatcher nearby looked toward Ethan. No one spoke. They had all heard that final voice. His supervisor immediately requested the recording. Ethan opened the call history. There was nothing. No recording, no timestamp, no call duration, no system log. The computer showed no evidence that the call had ever happened. The IT department spent the next hour searching the servers. Nothing. Management blamed a temporary software error. By sunrise, everyone had accepted the explanation. Everyone except Ethan, because one sentence refused to leave his mind. He knows I'm talking to you. Not the operator. Not someone. She had spoken directly to him. as though she already knew exactly who he was. 3 nights later, the digital clock reached 2:17 a.m. again. The same alert tone echoed through the room. Incoming emergency call. No caller ID, no location, no signal. Ethan answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? For several seconds, only breathing. Then the same frightened little girl whispered, Ethan. His blood ran cold. He had never told her his name. I found the basement key. A heavy metal door slammed somewhere in the distance. The child gasped. He's awake. Her breathing became frantic. Before Ethan could ask another question, she whispered something so quietly he almost missed it. You were too late last time. The line went dead. Ethan remained frozen. Too late. Last time? He had never spoken to this girl before. Or at least, that's what he wanted to believe. Unable to ignore the growing feeling in his chest, Ethan spent the remainder of his shift searching through every missing child case connected to Black Hollow during the past 20 years. Most files led nowhere. Runaways, custody disputes, false reports. Then one photograph stopped him. Emily Carter, age 8, missing. October 18th, 2007, exactly 17 years earlier. According to the investigation, Emily had vanished from her family's isolated farmhouse during the middle of the night. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no suspect, no body, only an empty bedroom. Witness statements mentioned something strange. Emily's parents had repeatedly reported hearing scratching sounds inside the walls during the week before she disappeared. The police dismissed it as mice. Ethan stared at Emily's school photograph. His hands slowly tightened around the case file. He recognized that voice. It was hers. He opened the archived emergency call records from the night Emily disappeared. His breathing stopped. At 2:17 a.m., a 911 call had been placed from the Carter farmhouse. Call duration, 34 seconds. Dispatcher assigned, unknown. Recording, missing. System notes, no record available. Someone had erased it. Or someone had made sure no one would ever hear the faded case file as dawn crept through the communication center windows. The words on the screen refused to make sense. A missing child, a deleted 911 call, the exact same time, the exact same voice, 17 years apart. Logic told him it was impossible. Experience told him to let it go. But something far older than reason whispered that the story had never actually ended. It had simply been waiting. When his shift ended, Ethan drove straight toward the county records office instead of going home. The building was nearly empty. Most of the staff hadn't even unlocked their offices yet. An elderly archivist named Margaret Sullivan looked up from behind a stack of yellowing documents. You look like you've seen a ghost. Ethan forced a smile. I'm looking for everything you have on the Carter family. Her expression changed immediately. You don't want those files. I wasn't asking for advice. For several long seconds, she simply stared at him. Then she disappeared into the archive room. When she returned, she placed a weathered cardboard box on the table. Dust covered every corner. No one had touched it in years. I've worked here for 29 years, Margaret said quietly. You're the first person who's asked to see these since the investigation was closed. Inside the box were crime scene photographs, old newspaper articles, witness interviews, handwritten police notes. Most of it matched what Ethan had already read, until he found one document that had never been digitized. It was written by Deputy Sheriff Alan Mercer, dated October 21st, 2007, 3 days after Emily disappeared. Repeated scratching noises reported beneath the farmhouse. Officers entered basement at approximately 11:40 p.m. Basement appeared larger than original building plans indicate. Search terminated after Officer Daniel Reeves reported hearing a child's voice calling his name from inside the crawl space. No child located. Ethan reread the sentence 3 times, calling his name, not calling for help. calling him. He continued reading. Officer Reeves resigned 6 days later, never provided explanation. There was no additional report, no follow-up investigation, nothing. Almost as if someone had decided the basement was a place better left unexplored. Margaret noticed Ethan's silence. "I told you not to open that box. You knew about this?" She slowly nodded. "My father was one of the volunteer firefighters who searched that property." "What happened?" She hesitated before continuing. "But after that night, he nailed every basement window in our house shut. He said some doors only look closed." The room suddenly felt colder. Ethan carefully packed the files back into the box. Before leaving, he asked one final question. "Does the Carter farmhouse still exist?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. Finally, "It shouldn't." "What does that mean?" "It burned down in 2009, but people still report seeing lights inside." The farmhouse stood nearly 40 minutes outside Black Hollow, hidden behind overgrown trees. The road leading there had almost disappeared beneath years of weeds and cracked asphalt. Most GPS systems no longer recognized it. Even Ethan's navigation suddenly lost signal less than a mile away. The forest around him was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, only the wind moving through dead branches. When the farmhouse finally appeared through the trees, he slowed the car. According to official records, it had burned to the ground. Instead, an old 2-story farmhouse stood almost untouched. Its faded white paint peeled from the walls. Several windows were broken. The front porch leaned dangerously to one side, yet it was standing, exactly where it shouldn't have been. Ethan stepped out of the car. The silence was overwhelming. He raised his phone to take a photograph. The camera froze. The screen flickered, then shut itself off, even though the battery had been fully charged. A cold breeze swept across the yard. Something moved behind an upstairs curtain. Just for a second, a small figure, standing perfectly still, watching him. When he looked again, the window was empty. He approached the front porch. Every step made the old wood groan beneath his boots. The front door was slightly open, just enough to reveal complete darkness inside. He called out, "Hello?" No answer, only silence. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, scratch, scratch, scratch. Exactly the same sound he had heard through the headset. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across old wood. Ethan instinctively reached for his flashlight. Its beam cut through layers of dust floating in the stale air. The house looked abandoned. Furniture remained exactly where it had been left years ago. Family photographs still hung crooked on the walls. A child's bicycle rested near the staircase. Everything was covered in dust, except a trail of small, muddy footprints, fresh, bare feet, leading toward the basement door. Ethan's breathing slowed. The basement door stood at the end of the hallway, closed from the other side. Someone knocked once, softly, then twice, then 3 times. The scratching stopped. A little girl's voice whispered through the wood. "Ethan." She sounded closer than ever. "I've been waiting for you." His hand slowly reached for the doorknob. It felt warm, as though someone had been holding it from the other side only moments before. The brass doorknob felt strangely warm against Ethan's hand. Not warm from sunlight, not warm from the house. Warm, like another hand had been wrapped around it only seconds earlier. His instincts screamed at him to leave. Every year of emergency training told him never to enter an unknown scene alone. He should have called the sheriff. He should have waited for backup. Instead, he slowly turned the handle. The basement door opened with a long, aching creak. A damp, icy smell drifted upward. Rotting wood, wet earth, something older, something that had been trapped underground for a very long time. Ethan aimed his flashlight down the narrow staircase. The beam disappeared into darkness. He counted 13 wooden steps. Halfway down, the light flickered, then steadied again. He took another step, and another. The air became noticeably colder. By the time he reached the bottom, his breath had become visible. The basement looked much larger than it should have, far larger. The farmhouse above wasn't nearly big enough to support a space this size. Concrete walls stretched into darkness on both sides. Old support beams vanished into shadows the flashlight couldn't reach. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Slow, rhythmic, like a clock counting down. Drip, drip, drip. Then he noticed the walls. Someone had carved thousands of lines into the wood. Not words, names, hundreds of names. Each one scratched so deeply that splintered wood curled outward. Some looked decades old. Others appeared fresh, very fresh. His flashlight stopped on one name. Emily Carter. Below it, another. Daniel Reeves, the deputy who had resigned after searching this basement. Ethan's pulse quickened. He scanned farther down the wall. His heart nearly stopped. Near the bottom, one name looked newer than all the others. The wood was still pale where it had been carved. Ethan Brooks. He instinctively stepped backward. "No," he whispered. "I've never been here." A voice answered from somewhere behind him. "I know." Ethan spun around. No one. Only darkness. The flashlight suddenly dimmed. Not completely. Just enough for the shadows to begin moving. At first he thought his eyes were adjusting. Then he realized. The shadows were moving independently of the light. They slid across the floor, along the walls, across the ceiling, always staying just beyond the edge of the beam. He heard soft footsteps, not ahead, behind him. He turned. Nothing. Then the footsteps changed direction, circling him, slowly, patiently, as if something was studying him. A child's laugh echoed somewhere in the darkness, not happy, not playful, empty, like a memory trying to imitate joy. "Ethan." The little girl's voice floated through the basement. "I'm over here." His flashlight caught the outline of a small figure standing nearly 40 feet away. A little girl, long blonde hair, a pale blue nightgown, bare feet. Her head hung forward, hiding her face. "Emily?" She didn't answer. She simply turned and walked deeper into the darkness. "Ethan, please hurry. I'm running out of time." He followed. Against every rational thought in his mind, every step carried him farther beneath the farmhouse, farther than the building above should have allowed. The tunnel seemed impossible. It stretched endlessly beneath solid rock. The walls slowly changed. Old wooden beams gave way to rough stone, then ancient brick, as though different parts had been built during different centuries. He suddenly stopped. There were children's drawings covering the walls, crude stick figures, black forests, a tall shadow standing beside small houses. Every drawing showed the same thing. The shadow had no face, only two white eyes, watching, always watching. A cold breeze brushed past him, but there was no opening, no window, no source for the wind, only darkness. Then, he heard breathing, very close, not his own, something standing directly behind him, slowly. He turned. No one. His flashlight illuminated only empty stone. He exhaled, then froze. A second breath escaped into the cold air, not from him, visible beside his own. Someone else was standing inches away, completely invisible. The second cloud of breath drifted upward, then another, and another. Whoever or whatever stood beside him wasn't moving. It was simply breathing, watching, waiting. Without warning, every light in the basement went out. The flashlight, his watch, even his phone screen. Complete darkness swallowed everything. Then a match struck somewhere ahead. A tiny orange flame appeared. Emily stood holding the match. For the first time, she slowly lifted her face, her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, you have to leave, before he realizes you're real." The match went out. Instantly, something enormous inhaled in the darkness. Not like a person, not like an animal. Much deeper, much larger. The sound echoed through the underground chambers. And then, a voice spoke from somewhere impossibly close, almost touching his ear. "You answered the first call. You answered the second." A long pause followed. Then the voice whispered, "You'll answer the last one too." Ethan ran. Every instinct took over at once. He didn't care where the tunnel led anymore. He only wanted daylight. The darkness behind him wasn't empty. It was moving. Heavy footsteps echoed through the underground passage. Slow, measured, never hurried. As though whatever followed him already knew he couldn't escape. His flashlight suddenly flickered back to life. The narrow beam bounced wildly across the stone walls as he sprinted. The tunnel had changed. He was certain of it. The path behind him no longer looked the same. Passages that hadn't existed minutes earlier now stretched into complete darkness. Others had vanished entirely. The basement wasn't simply beneath the farmhouse. It was changing, rearranging itself, like something alive. Another sound echoed through the tunnel, a telephone ringing, clear, sharp, impossible. Ethan slowed. The sound came from a side passage he hadn't noticed before. Ring, ring, ring. Against the wall stood an old wooden table covered in dust. Resting on top of it, a black rotary telephone. Its cord disappeared into the stone floor. There was nowhere it could possibly connect. Yet it continued ringing. Every nerve in his body told him not to answer. Then he remembered Emily. If she had truly been calling for 17 years, maybe this was how. The ringing stopped. Silence. 1 second later, the phone rang again, louder, more urgently. Ethan reached toward the receiver. His hand trembled. The moment his fingers touched it, the ringing stopped. He slowly lifted the handset. Only static answered. Then, a familiar voice, his own. "I found the basement." Ethan's blood turned to ice. It was his voice. Every word, every breath, exactly as he had spoken them earlier that day. The recording continued. "I'm going downstairs." A pause. Then, his own voice whispered something he had never said. "If anyone finds this, don't answer the phone." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the receiver. His reflection stared back from its polished surface. Except, the reflection smiled. Ethan wasn't smiling. He dropped the handset. It shattered across the stone floor. The smile disappeared. The footsteps behind him stopped. Complete silence filled the tunnel. Then, every telephone around him began ringing. One, then another, then dozens. Old wall phones, pay phones, office phones, rotary phones. Hundreds of telephones appeared from the darkness, resting on shelves, hanging from broken walls, sitting on the ground. None of them had wires. All of them rang together. The deafening sound echoed through every passage. Ring, 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 ring. Suddenly, every phone stopped at exactly the same moment. A child's voice whispered from every receiver at once. "Ethan, he's here." The temperature dropped instantly. Frost spread across the floor beneath his boots. His breath became thick white clouds. Something stepped into the flashlight beam. It was nearly 7 feet tall, too thin. Its arms hung far below its knees. Its skin looked gray, stretched tightly over an unnaturally long body. Where its face should have been, there was only smooth skin, except for 2 pale white eyes. They didn't glow. They simply reflected the light, unblinking. Watching, the creature tilted its head, slowly, almost curiously. Then Ethan noticed something even worse. Its chest was moving, not because it was breathing, because voices were trapped inside. Dozens of muffled voices, adults, children, crying, begging, calling for help, as though every victim it had ever taken still existed somewhere inside it. One voice became louder than the others. Emily. Ethan, don't let him hear your fear. The creature took one slow step forward. The ground vibrated. Another step. The tunnel lights that hadn't existed moments earlier, began flickering one after another. Each flicker revealed something different. Children standing silently along the walls, then gone. Old police officers, then gone. Search volunteers, then gone. Every missing person connected to Black Hollow seemed to appear for a fraction of a second before fading back into darkness. All of them were staring at Ethan, not asking for help, warning him. The creature stopped only a few feet away. It slowly raised one impossibly long hand. A single finger pointed directly at Ethan's chest. Then, for the first time, it spoke. Its voice wasn't deep. It wasn't loud. It was every stolen voice speaking together. You finally came back. The tunnel shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Stone cracked beneath Ethan's feet. Behind the creature, Emily suddenly appeared. For the first time, she wasn't crying. She looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Then she screamed, "Wake up! Ethan, I'm home." The voice was perfect. Every word sounded exactly like Sarah. For one impossible second, he almost believed it. Then the thing smiled. Its mouth split wider, exposing rows of jagged teeth that no human could possess. Ethan scrambled backward through the mud, searching desperately for his shotgun. His fingers brushed cold steel. The creature lunged. He pulled the trigger. Boom! The blast echoed across Hollow Creek. The towering figure vanished into a cloud of black ash before the pellets even reached it. Silence. Only the rain remained. Breathing hard, Ethan stumbled inside the farmhouse and locked every door. Moments later, a truck pulled into the driveway. Real headlights, real engine. Sarah stepped out carrying a lantern. She froze when she saw Ethan's terrified face. What happened? He finally told her everything. The footsteps, the voices, the creature wearing his father's face, the things inside the barn, the monster that had spoken with her voice. For the first time, Sarah didn't question a single word. She simply whispered, "We're leaving." The following morning, they drove nearly 40 miles to visit an elderly pastor who had spent decades documenting strange disappearances throughout the Appalachian Mountains. The old man listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, the pastor slowly removed a worn leather journal from a shelf. Inside were newspaper clippings dating back almost a century, families disappearing, livestock found stripped to bone overnight, hunters reporting voices that mimicked loved ones. Every incident pointed to the same valley, the same land. The pastor looked Ethan directly in the eyes. Those oak trees weren't cursed. They were a prison. He explained that long before settlers arrived, the local people believed certain places were never meant to be disturbed. 2 ancient trees had marked the boundary of something that lived beneath the earth. For generations, no one crossed that boundary until Ethan unknowingly destroyed it. "You didn't invite them," the pastor said quietly. "You removed the only thing keeping them contained." A heavy silence filled the room. "Can it be stopped?" Sarah asked. The old man hesitated. "No, only escaped." That afternoon, Ethan made the hardest decision of his life. He sold every remaining animal, packed only what would fit inside the truck, left behind nearly everything he had spent years building. As the sun began to set, they drove away from the farmhouse without looking back. Neither of them spoke. Several miles later, Sarah glanced into the passenger side mirror. Her face turned white. "Ethan." He looked. Far beyond the empty fields, someone stood on the farmhouse porch. Too far away to recognize. Too still to be human. Watching. Waiting. Then, another figure appeared beside it. Then another. Then dozens. Tall, black silhouettes silently filled the porch, the roof, the barn, and the yard. None of them moved. They simply watched the truck disappear down the road. The abandoned farmhouse remained empty for years. Eventually, the roof collapsed. The barn rotted into the earth. Nature slowly reclaimed everything. Locals once again refused to walk that road after sunset. If travelers asked why, no one answered directly. They only said one thing: some land doesn't belong to people. Even today, old maps still mark that forgotten property. But no address exists anymore. No records show who owns it. And if you somehow find Hollow Creek after dark, you may notice something standing between the trees, perfectly still, waiting for someone curious enough to cross the boundary again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next true horror story might make you think twice before ever trusting the darkness outside your window again.